On August 10th, the Turkish parliament passed a law that represents the first concrete legislative step in the current peace process. If you had to summarize the law in one sentence, what does it specifically regulate and what does it deliberately not regulate?
It's a very loaded question. So it's hard to describe it in one sentence, but in the words of the Kurdish leader, Mr. Abdullah Öcalan, it is the first step in a 1,000-mile long road. So it's a long road, but we have taken the first step. And that in itself is a historic point in history, let's say. The reason it is significant is that there have been at least 6 attempts to resolve this issue, the Kurdish question, and to end the armed conflict. And with these 6 attempts, I'm only referring to the final Kurdish rebellion, which we call the 29th rebellion in the whole Kurdish history in this region. And in the 29th one, there have been 6 attempts to resolve this question. And for the first time, we have reached this level of progress in the talks where a legal framework that actually envisions proper return of people, not exactly proper, it has so many shortcomings, but it is still a good start. Now, what is it going to regulate is, of course, a big question. It has 12 articles, and in those 12 articles, 2 of them significantly addresses how or who would benefit from that. And mainly, let's say, maybe one of them, the 7th article, is provisioning who should benefit from this law and who should not. So it says it excludes 2 groups. One group is those who have been indicted of crimes before 2005. And it excludes people who are indicted or accused or charged with manslaughter will not be able to benefit from this law. Now, since we expect most of the armed combatants, so Kurdish militants, to benefit from it, and judging by the fact that these people have taken part in active conflict, just as Turkish soldiers have, they should be able to benefit from it and come back. But these are parts of conversations that we could have later. But for now, we focus on the start that could allow more reform and more law to be built on. So let's consider this like a good basis for these talks.
What role do women currently play in the peace process? Particularly, which role will they play in the National Solidarity Council?
National Solidarity Committee, we have 2 women members from our party. We often try to have this gender sensitive gender equality in our representation in such councils. And they made sure that women's issue was actually included in the final report of National Solidarity report, the final report that they released in February this year. When it comes to how women could take part in these talks, of course, there's so many international resolutions. For example, UN resolution, I think it was 1325, the inclusion of women in peace and security talks. That's one of them. And Turkey, is signatory to so many UN resolutions. And it did recently approved another resolution that passed through Interparliamentary Union. The US Peace and Security Committee passed a resolution where it says women's inclusion in peace, again, was vital. And Turkish representatives who were present in the hall when that was getting voted, they also voted in favor. So in the beginning of this interview, I mentioned that the law envisions the formation of committees. These committees will have subcommittees, and one of these subcommittees could have more women, and that's one of the things that we propose. We also propose equal representation of women in the formation of memberships. So by that, I mean, if a committee will have 6 members, it should be 3 women, 3 men to have completely gender equality there. But we also think there should be committees that are specifically have only women members, no men, so that they could look at the impact of this war on women and what needs to be done, or how different titles, different subjects could be handled with a woman's perspective.
What has been done so far in the peace process, including with regard to women?
In terms of women, however, we have been working on the ground where there's a manifesto called Peace and Democratic Society Manifesto. So we gather in villages and neighborhoods, and we hold these town halls with women, and we read the manifesto, and we have discussions, and we talk to them about what they envision as a result of this process, what they think or should happen as a result of this process. So what we have done so far is a preparatory work, but soon, once this law actually takes form and is materialized through the release of the decision of the National Security Council, then we will be able to put all that practice that we had with town halls into practice and welcome women, these guerrilla women who will come back here and take active part in politics. And in our Women's Assembly, our spokesperson and our coordination actually gathered with women bodies or women structures of other political parties, and they talked to them about the process. So while, mixed committees were gathering and talking and having dialogue, women were also talking and gathering and trying to understand how they could convey the final messaging of the manifesto and of the call and of the process to their own bases. And when I talk about these women, they come from different backgrounds. They're conservative, some of them are nationalists, some of them are secular. So these are women of different backgrounds, and they managed to sit down and talk and explain what they see as a result, what they see this process as, and what they expect from it.
The DEM party approved the bill despite the exclusion of serious criminal offenses and the complete absence of any provision regarding Abdullah Öcalan's status. Why was this still the right choice from the party's perspective?
As I said in the beginning, it's missing a lot of points. It is also excluding a lot of people. But even in its with its shortcomings, it still allows for the return of at least 4,000 something people who are not able to return at the moment or who are in prison at the moment. And I think that's a huge number if you think of the space in politics, if you think of how political parties organize or how political movements in general organize themselves. We're talking about 4,000 extremely educated, well-read, well-trained, dedicated political people who can be right now on the ground and mobilize people and actually take part in the formation of a democratic society. So, we keep reading or watching about 300 Spartans, and just think of these people as more than 300 Spartans who are ready to assume their role in building a society. So this law will allow for the return of them. That's one of the reasons we voted in favor, because even a tiny start is still a start. And secondly, the law, as you have very rightly said, it still does not address Mr. Öcalan's status, and that needs to be cleared. But there's a little bit of a loophole somewhere in the law that says there will be a board that will have members from the government, but there will also be monitoring boards that could have members and leaders from all backgrounds. And here, in the Board of Disarmament and Politicization, Mr. Abdullah Öcalan will be able to assume the role of leadership there, because he will be managing the return of ex-combatants, the PKK guerrillas, but he will also be the bridge that does the confirmation and also, so we call it tate and test it. So one of them is confirming, one of them is observing. So observing and confirming will be done through his leadership. In that regard, the law allows the foundation of that. Now, I mentioned a board that will have more government and state officials. That board later in the next months, let's say 6 months to a year, they could make more moves to actually include those people that have been excluded from the first draft law. So that's what it allows. It allows a window, and we just take a step through this window and work towards a bigger and wider framework.
What dangers does the Kurdish society still face till today, and what should be considered warning signs?
Is a stark moment to remember for all of us that a provocation could break the whole thing, and to avoid having a weak structure that could just collapse with assassinations and provocations. The society needs to be more organized and mobilized than ever. Because right now we're sitting in the eye of a storm. It's almost a tornado, and we're in the eye of it. And that tornado is happening right now in the Middle East. The West is redesigning the region with a complete disregard for different ethnic groups and different peoples. And they just want to have tyrants who are in control of governments. And in the ruling of these tyrants, what happens to nations without states is genocide. So at the verge of this genocidal threat, we need to be more connected, more united, and more mobilized than ever. And I understand that the Kurdish society is divided in so many different camps. But when it comes to our fate, what could happen to us if things go sideways, the tyrants will not look at what political views we have. They're just going to look at our identity, and that will be what they care about. So the Kurds should be aware that the dangers are great, but also the opportunities are great, and that requires being together and standing tall.
Following the failure of the 2013 peace process, which collapsed, why should Kurdish society trust this process this time around?
The person that we trust is the leader, Abdullah Öcalan. We believe in his common sense, and we believe in his leadership, and we know that he could negotiate in the best way possible for the best of our people. That's one thing we trust in. Second, we know that women, when they are strong, mobilized, dedicated, and focused, they are able to form their own communes and their own structures that would allow self-reliance, self-sustainability, free from the system. And they don't believe in the people who sit on the other side of the table, but they know who is on their side of the table and who does the negotiation, and that's what matters.
And how are you affected by the law on a personal level?
About a decade ago, I met Essa Musa. And Essa Musa was the lawyer of Nelson Mandela. He was in Istanbul 10 years ago, and he was part of this delegation that demanded for freedom of Mr. Abdullah Öcalan. And we were having dinner, and Essa Musa said, because me and my other friends, we were just being depressed, and we were saying that our hair is getting grayer and grayer every day, and we don't know if we're actually going to see the freedom of our people someday. And he mentioned that when he was young, he was at a protest right after he left school. It was in his school. He left school. He went out. There was a protest, and someone was holding a sign that said, "Freedom in my lifetime." And he said he thought at the time that he would not be able to see freedom at his time. But he said a few decades after he saw that banner that said "Freedom at my lifetime," in my lifetime, he actually saw it. He became part of that freedom and he formed it. I'm very excited that I will be able to see that in my lifetime. Yes, I do have many gray hairs, but I'm alive to see it. And this week, we're going to be remembering more than 700 young women and men who have fallen in the last 10 years. Tomorrow, we're going to gather in Amed, and we're going to look at their faces, and we're going to read their stories, and we're going to sit down with their family members, and we're going to remember their sacrifices. And we're going to remember that they didn't see freedom in their lifetime, but we have a lifetime to live for them as well, and to see freedom and enjoy it for them as well.
What can women do on an international level to guide and support this process?
It's a strange time in international politics. You could have a Spanish president or prime minister who could preach leftist values. That same prime minister could come to Turkey and buy some weapons from a Turkish president. So hypocrisy is everywhere. And when hypocrisy is so out there and everywhere, what could be done is forming an international movement of women's and increase in women's solidarity. A German activist was in Kurdistan to show solidarity with Rojava, and she was detained and she was held in a deportation center where she was raped by a state officer. And she made that announcement recently. But she knew that Turkey or Turkish removal centers, deportation centers, are notorious with these stories. But she still had the courage to travel all the way to here to show solidarity. So wherever they are, people internationally, let's say, women of different backgrounds, different countries, they can express their support for these talks and show Turkey that it could be, it could lead a good example, a good example globally if it takes the right path in forming sustainable peace.
How will we be able to tell in 6 months whether this peace process is truly working and wasn't just a political announcement?
It's a very good question, because it actually brings out this point in the law, because the law says that once the National Security Council releases its decision to say that they are confirming the full disarmament of PKK, then they will release that decision in the official gazette. Once it's in that gazette, in the official gazette, then in a 6 months period from the day that it's on the gazette till 6 months later, the whole return, the whole applications to benefit from this law has to be complete. So we have a 6 months window to have these people come back. And once we start seeing happy reunion videos, these people that we used to see either in exile in Europe or on Kandil Mountains, once we see them in the streets of Amed, we're going to know that this process is succeeding and is making actual progress. And that's one sign that I will be looking at. And I think that's one sign so many families will be looking for as well.
How does the law affect Kurds in other parts of Kurdistan and the diaspora?
So with diaspora, there's so many people who are asylum seekers right now in Europe. And we see deportations mostly from Switzerland, where cases have not been finalized and people are being deported. But our strength in diaspora also lies in the people who left back in the 80s. They had families. But when it comes to the three other parts, For Kurds of Syria, Kurds of Rojava, the story is trickier because there the integration is still ongoing, the talks are still ongoing, and they were, in fact, on the verge of genocide just a few months ago. And the story in Rojava is still a developing one. For Bashur Kurdistan, however, for the Iraqi Kurdistan, I think their story is tricky again because geographically they're right there where Kurdish armed forces are fighting Iranian aggressions every day, and their position is trickier. And because of U.S. withdrawal from there, U.S. withdrawing its patriots from there, they also have a different security threat now. So their story is different as well. And when it comes to the Kurds of Rojhelat, I think they're at the verge of a revolution, and that's again a developing story. But one thing Kurds in 4 parts agree is that they say that if this issue is resolved in Bakure Kurdistan, it's going to have a positive impact for 3 other parts.
As an assessment, what would lead to a failure of the whole process, and what would happen if the process would fail?
Assassinations happen, mass killings happen, mass arrests happen, dismantling of our institutions, our municipalities, our political structures happen, daily crackdown on everyday life of Kurds happen. There's so much at risk if these talks fail. But while keeping all those in the back of our mind, we need to focus on the future, and we need to look ahead instead of looking back and being discouraged by the risks. Remembering the risks is good, but we cannot let those stop us from making brave choices. We have been in whole survival mode for so long. And when we are able to breathe and sit down and think of the whole thing, the whole 40-something years that have gone by, I think we're going to see how much progress we made despite the circumstances. But we also have so much to do. And this is a time for reconstruction. And our people need us more than ever. And they are ready to be part of this reconstruction. They are not victims. They have never been victims. They have the ability to be warriors. And I was thinking the other day, in the I think it was the Pacific, there's this small island where the people in their evolution, they have a different body type, different physiology that allows them to be underwater for more than 13 minutes. And I thought that our evolution has made us the perfect warriors and the perfect stubborn people that could survive any attack. And I think that's a superpower that every single person of Kurdistan have, and now will help us continue our legacy, our ideology, and our story.